All right, welcome to this special edition, bringing you the latest on what's going on, here in Rwanda, where we're having Chogam now. Prince Charles and the Duchess of Cornwall, Camilla, are in Rwanda. And they're about to be joined by 40 heads of state, at least 40 heads of state from Africa, Europe, Asia, the Americas, Caribbean, and the Pacific. Well, the conversations for this much anticipated high-level meeting will be around extremism, climate change, among other topics. Now, before we get into what is going on the ground, please keep in mind we'll be keeping you up to date with that meeting. We wanted to get into a discussion about what has happened so far, anticipate what could be happening, and so much more. Now, I'm not alone on the set today. I'm Isabel Maswazera, but I'm joined by senior researchers, veterans, people we have come to celebrate here on the African continent, a Pan-African. Hey, you don't want to miss any bit of this, and you might want to pick up that phone call, and let somebody else know. Now, on the set with me, I do have Dr. Frederick Goloba Mutebi, who is an independent researcher. He is a former executive director of Makerere Institute of Social Research. Welcome.
Thank you.
All right, and also with me is an editor, a newscaster, an online writer with Deutsche Welle, who is, well, also a gentleman whose work I do celebrate. Isaac Mogawi, it's good to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Gentlemen, a lot has happened. Where can I start? From the Youth Forum to the Women's Forum. We had the biotech meeting and also malaria summit. We've had so much going on, both at the meetings and on the sidelines. But before we get into this conversation and even break down what has been going on, the question on every single person's mind is, why Africa? This is the 6th time, yes, but why Africa? Why Rwanda right now? What is it that is so unique? There seems to be so much hype around this thing, and the fact that it's in Africa and it has brought in every single person. Even some people we didn't expect to have, like representation from Qatar. I'm going to start with you, Doctor. What are your thoughts?
I think that the Chogam meeting in Rwanda is perhaps more important than other meetings that have taken place in Africa for one particular reason, in that Rwanda is a very young member of the Commonwealth. Rwanda was accepted into the Commonwealth family in 2009, amidst controversy, if you may remember. But also Rwanda has never been a British colony. So one would have thought that it would naturally go to an older member of the group.
Yes.
It would probably be preferable to have it in an English-speaking country that was once a British colony. So Rwanda comes as pretty much, almost one could say, in rather crude terms, as a misfit, unexpected member, unconventional member, very young member of the club. But look, here we are. Chogam is in Rwanda. Rwanda is not known to be an Anglophone country. Mm-hmm. So in very many ways, I think that one could borrow the cliche that Rwanda is punching above its weight. Ooh. To have this conference come here within a very short time of its accession to membership of the club.
Mm. You've told me everything that says it shouldn't have hosted. Why do you think it's hosting?
I would think that Rwanda would have made representations to the Commonwealth to host the meeting. That in itself is not enough for the meeting to be hosted here. I think that Rwanda went ahead and proved its capacity to organize such a meeting, because it's not the largest meeting that has happened in this country, or even the only large meeting that has happened. I think it's not an exaggeration to say that Rwanda has proved its capacity. It has proved that it's very good at holding events of this kind. Rwanda is very safe. It's very highly organized. I was in one session where one of the panelists made a very important point, that in Rwanda, keeping time is a serious matter.
Absolutely.
It's not a serious matter in every country. So in many ways, we in Africa, or even we in the region, have learned to take Rwanda seriously. When they say they want to do something, we know that they are going to pursue it and they are going to be consistent about it and pursue it to the very end. So Rwanda must have proved to the Commonwealth that it is well positioned to host this meeting. It has the capacity to host it. And the last few days have demonstrated that without any doubt at all.
Well, I'll be coming back to you to discuss a little bit about the consequences of punching above its weight, if any. All right, Isaac, I want to pick your mind on the same. This seems to be quite a unique situation. Why do you think Rwanda is hosting this event, and what does it mean?
I mean, why not? Is the first question I asked myself. You know, I wasn't surprised. It's not the first conference that big event like Goloba has just mentioned. And by the way, many of the guests, at least I interacted with, were like, this is the right place to host it in terms of order. Yeah, and many of them were looking forward to seeing the cleanest city in Africa, if I may take it lightly.
Yes, yes.
I've covered some CHOGM summits in Uganda. I've followed that took place in Australia and in the UK. But if we are to rewind or we go into the archives, yeah, it's not to say that, you know, I'm trying to blow the trumpet of Rwanda, but why not? You know, where you have to give credit where it is due. Yes. When you see when it comes to organizing the themes, you know, the forums that the summit, the CHOGM summit, you know, has on the roster, I mean, this was absolutely amazing, even though it had been delayed for 2 years. It was long overdue for us to have such a bigger summit. And guess what? You know, out of this, even FIFA is coming to hold its biggest forum here in Rwanda in March 2023. Yes. You know, and let's not forget also that it's one of the cities that delegates whichever conference or summit they want to attend. They always go around and say, which city can we hold the summit? And one city that comes in the mind of many people who have attended many conferences is Rwanda. So for me personally, I'm not surprised, you know, because I wanted to talk to many delegates as fast as I could on Friday when I arrived, whether at the airport, whether on Sunday when they're picking up the badges and taking the COVID tests. And I asked them the same question that you're posing to us, you know, do you think Rwanda deserves this? It's like, what are you talking about, you know? We're already excited to land, you know. Yeah. We are looking forward to going to every conference, although we have to register for one. But they're like, we wish we could have access, like you guys of the media, to be able to go to every conference or forum. Absolutely, it deserves it. That shouldn't be a question at all. Yes. Yeah.
Now, I'll be coming back to you to talk to you. You talked about the issue of media. Has this been covered in the light that you hoped it would be? But right after we come back to you, Doctor, on the issue of punching above its weight. Now, some of the critics have said that Rwanda is really milking its last milk drops. Do you agree with that? Some seem to think that the country is too young, like you said earlier, and we're taking on very big responsibility with meetings such as this, and some of them are arguing we could be straining ourselves too thin. Do you agree with that?
No, I don't agree, and it's not the first time things of this kind are said about Rwanda. I've been in this country long enough to have encountered stories of this kind. I would like to tell you a story that, of which you may be aware, that when Rwanda proposed to build its first 5-star hotel, just one hotel. Some people who are habitual critics of Rwanda started jumping up and down and saying, well, what's the point of having a 5-star hotel in Rwanda, because there's a lot of poverty and so on and so forth. Now, of course, the Serena was built. And among those who were criticizing that decision, people who, as soon as it was open, they started booking and staying in that very hotel. When Rwanda proposed to build Bugesera Airport, the same noises were made.
Yes, yes, yes.
When Rwanda was building the Kigali Arena, same noises were made. When Rwanda put up the convention center, exactly the same things were said. I have heard these things so many times. Yeah. It doesn't surprise me that people say these things. What surprises me is that they don't seem to get tired. They jump from one thing to another.
It's relentless.
They say exactly the same things and they're proven wrong each time, but they just keep going. So that surprises me. What gives them the capacity to keep hammering away at something that just always ends up proving that they're wrong? That's one. Yeah. The second thing is that Rwanda does not do these things randomly. the government of Rwanda, as far as I understand it, is a government that is a thinking government. Now, they consider what they want to do very carefully. Again, I would give you an example. The establishment of Rwanda Air, again, was met with a great deal of skepticism. It wouldn't work, this, that, the other thing. Now, Rwanda Air, the construction of hotels in this country, the waiving of visa requirements, giving people visas upon arrival, all these things are part and parcel of Rwanda's MICE strategy.
Yes.
And this has happened because a lot of thinking has gone into it. Now, the hosting of meetings, several meetings here, every year, year after year, has a certain impact on this country in that it is growing the hotel industry.
Yes.
It is equipping people working in the hospitality industry with skills that are necessary to become even better at hosting meetings. It is helping the agricultural sector of this country because farmers are able to produce food which is consumed because of these meetings that are coming here. It is exposing Rwanda to people who have spent so much time hearing all the negative narratives about the country. They come here, they see a completely different country from the one they thought they knew through the media.
Yeah.
That can only be good for Rwanda's image.
Absolutely.
And I think that Rwanda is now proving that this very highly ambitious MICE strategy that everybody loved to rubbish at the beginning is now beginning to show dividends. I'm not sure that there are many people out there who now doubt Rwanda's ability to host any size of meeting.
And yet they still scream. Speaking of screaming,
Yeah.
I know we quickly have to go to KCC. You who is watching, you can sit back, grab some popcorn, grab some juice, whatever it is that gets you comfortable. We're going to be bringing you all the action of what's taking place at the CHOGM Heads of State meeting that is about to kick off. Now, coming back to you, Isaac, the narrative and the media coverage around CHOGM. What do you make of it? Do you feel like a good job has been done to paint and to tell the story of Rwanda hosting this event, of Africa hosting this event? Again, 2 years after the last one, are you satisfied?
Yeah, I think the media, media practitioners that I saw around and the stories I read, they've attempted, to cover all the forums and the themes without adding in, pepper, salt and pepper here, or kachumbari like the Swahili would say. And I was so impressed the way they covered the climate change summit or forum. I was at the media center the other day and most of them were, scrambling for content to really report on it. It's an issue that is reported every now and then. But I wonder whether the leaders of some countries that I don't want to mention here are always listening or paying, due attention.
Yeah.
For me, that was a takeaway. I thought climate change was covered really pretty well.
Yes.
And then the youth forum, that was an A+ for me.
Yes, yes.
They want to be at the table of decision making. And I like the way they expounded on the fact that there should be debt relief. Remember, they have so many small companies, startups and all that need to be financed. And I think this is something that leaders have to look into. Debt relief, debt cancellation. They want debt cancellation away from the unemployment issues that have been, there for many, many years. Also, the Women Forum.
Yes.
Oh, we had creme de la creme of Africa's, top, policymakers, the women. And the fact that it was live, streamed live, yes, kudos also to RBA. Charity begins at home, You're doing a great job because everyone is getting content from you. So how would they cover without that being streamed live by RBA? I think you deserve also a trophy for that. So you're doing the coverage. It's really good. You're giving us content that we could have, hopping from one place to another. There are security issues that have to be taken care of by the organs. So in the presence of your Obi-Vans, wherever they are, you are helping other media companies to do what? To cover the story the way it should be covered. And all firms, I think, so far so good now. But I hope that some of the issues that the youth, raised, today the leaders, look into them.
Yeah.
We shouldn't give so much time. Okay, all the themes deserve so much time. We need to do business. Yeah, businessmen are watching, what the leaders are going to talk about. And the fact that the Youth Forum, ended on Tuesday, I hope what they discussed is not forgotten when the leaders meet today.
Yes.
Because they say they want to be part of that roundtable, not physically, of course. They want to be part of the decision making. And I hope maybe there's a slot, for them to be around there.
To actually, because I mean,
physically to be there.
Yeah, there's been a lot of conversations around, is this another time for us to talk and no action? And I think seeing that would definitely be testament to, taking the words into action. One of the things that happened is the business forum, and I want to quickly talk about that because you raised the issue of youth. Coming back to you, Doctor, the issue of upskilling and reskilling, the issue of unemployment. Those are some of the things that came up. Also looking at Africa, majority of our population being young people, but also we have staggering numbers of unemployment. What did you make of what was discussed in that regard? And do you think that some of the results that came out of the conversations as interventions that were presented were good enough to see us to the next level?
As far as that issue is concerned, I attended a number of sessions at the business forum. But for me, perhaps the two most interesting ones were the one on the Kigali International Financial Center.
Okay.
And investing in Rwanda. Now, the one on the Kigali International Financial Center was very striking for me in the sense that on the panel we had only African entrepreneurs in the high-tech industry. These are people who are now running multi-million-dollar companies across the continent. Some of them have now invested far afield as far as the United States. But what I found striking at that session is that all of them are scrambling to come and set up shop in Kigali. There are those that said they have already started setting up. There are those that are coming in a few months' time. All those are jobs coming to Rwanda.
Yeah.
But above the jobs, all those are examples of serious companies investing in Rwanda. Their peers outside of Rwanda who are not yet considering investing here are going to wonder, why did they go to Rwanda? Of course, they are then going to explore why these companies came to Rwanda, and who knows, they might also be attracted to come to Rwanda. More jobs coming to this country. So I think that the business forum and the numbers and variety of people it brought to Rwanda, many of whom had never been here, have now understood the seriousness of the government here and its hunger for attracting investors to come to this country. And I think that this is going to have multiplier effects. Yesterday I attended the session on investing in Rwanda. And on the panel we had entrepreneurs who have set up shop in Rwanda. We had Dubai World, who I understand have created 600 jobs since they established here. We had a Turkish construction company, which I understand built Kigali Arena. I understand they are not only in construction, they are in the hospitality industry. The owner of the company made a statement there and said he has actually now made up his mind that not only is he coming to make money in Rwanda, but he's also coming to introduce operations here which are going to equip Rwandans with skills. He's establishing a hospitality school in Rwanda. Now that is skilling Rwandans who are going to work in the hospitality industry, make Rwanda even more capable of hosting bigger and more complex meetings. That can only be a good thing. He's going to take a lot of young Rwandan engineers because his company works in several countries. And he said, look, I'm going to take our young Rwandan engineers to go and work at our sites in other countries so that we can train them on the job. Now, what will these young engineers do when they come back to Rwanda? My hunch is that they will come here and also seek to establish companies of a similar kind, come and bring more skills to Rwanda. So, yeah, the business forum for me showed me, or at least it proved what I already knew, that people out there are taking Rwanda as an investment destination very seriously.
Yeah. And that can only mean good things for Africa, because if there's anything that Rwanda has proven is we are the prototype for all things possible for Africa. So hopefully we can see this happening also for other countries. For those of you who are just tuning in, you're watching the Curtain Raiser Show for what is about to take place. That is a meeting bringing together heads of state from over 40 countries within the Commonwealth, and we'll be keeping you up to speed with that. We'll soon take you to the venue where the action is taking place. And this particular show is focusing on this year's theme, which is delivering a common future. Did the forums achieve tackling the topics that can actually help us arrive at that destination? I am joined by top researchers to give us the answers to that. One of the things that was talked about, gentlemen, on the at the venue was the issue of malaria. Well, there was a summit on that, and a lot of conversations have been going on around why health was such a big issue this year. And I want to talk to you, not just malaria. We had the biotech vaccine equity and creation of vaccines being heavily invested in, and we saw huge commitments that were made. But also the First Lady of the Republic of Rwanda attended an event where mental health was the topic of discussion. What do you guys make of that? I want to come to you, Isaac.
I will start with a comment that the First Lady made about mental health. She said, quote, "There is no Commonwealth without mental health." That was a strong statement, not a statement. I mean, it's just short, but really reaching to the heart, you know, that pulls out your emotions. There's so many instances where you find that people are struggling with mental issues, but because society has developed a term, you know, which I don't want to use often, like mad person. Yet someone is struggling with mental issues and they're neglected. You know, I think that's why it was important also at the Malaria Summit and neglected tropical diseases. They raised huge sums of money, I think 1.9 billion, if I do remember very well, to address these issues. But let me first take you back to a point that you mentioned about BioNTech, the first BioNTech factory constructed in Rwanda. That began, the highlight was, the groundbreaking was in the morning. That was a huge milestone. And I remember talking to my people in Berlin, you know, asking me, this is quite important for Rwanda, isn't it? I said, no, not only for Rwanda, but the whole of Africa. You do remember how vaccines were hoarded by the so-called, I prefer to call them the so-called developed countries, everyone for themselves. Now we're going to have a factory for Africa, not for Rwanda. You know, I think it's important that people really understand this. And when it comes to the Health Malaria Summit, yes, we've had so many of these summits.
I am still with Dr. Frederick Goloba Motebi and Isaac Mugabi. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Oh, what an opening ceremony, right? Now, so much has been said about Rwanda showing up really and being able to prepare a very memorable event. What do you make of what has been said, starting with the words of Prince Charles, who hailed Rwanda for its patience? He recognized how difficult it was with COVID-19 postponing, but he is actually really thrilled with the preparations. I'm going to start with you, Doctor.
For me, really, what I took from his speech was not, well, in addition to his hailing of the government of Rwanda for the very splendid job it has done organizing this summit, what struck me in his words was his experience visiting the Genocide Memorial.
Yes.
And visiting villages and looking at how people have progressed from where the country was at in 1994 up to today. I also read Prime Minister Boris Johnson's statement, which he wrote yesterday at the Genocide Memorial. And this happens to occur almost every time a foreign leader comes to Rwanda. Just how much going there encapsulates for them what actually happened here and what this country has been dealing with in the last 28, 29 years. I find that until people come here, and see things of that kind and visit villages where people are living side by side, former, perpetrators of the genocide and victims, they don't really get a full measure of the tragedy that this country has been trying to recover from. So I think that coming here and experiencing those things and seeing what has happened and talking to people, for me, does somewhat help Rwanda in the sense that people coming from the outside are able to understand the enormity of the problems that this government has been trying to address. There's a great deal of misunderstanding. I mean, you may have heard or even read people who claim that, Rwanda is exploiting what they call the genocide credit. It's a terribly stupid thing to say, and it can only be said by people who don't understand what happened here.
Or people who can hide behind the typing and the screens because you're not experiencing.
If you have been here and observed and listened to people and gone to the genocide memorials and read the history, you can't really afford to make statements of that kind. So that, for me, did strike a chord.
Yeah, and in his words, later on, he did say that if we are to forge a common future, we should find a common way, and I'm paraphrasing here, to acknowledge our past. Coming to you, Isaac, do you agree with what Doctor is saying here, that it's easy to just think of it as a thing that happened, but when you truly experience it, then you understand the magnitude?
I totally agree with him, because I've covered stories of survivors for the last 20 years. I've spoken to the women who were, raped. I've spoken to children born out of the genocide, out of rape, rather, by militias, and the resilience that he talked about. And even his statement that he wrote in the book, His Royal Highness, Prince Charles, was really touching. And I wouldn't like to repeat so much what my colleague Gorova said, but it would be naive of someone to think, not even stupid or naive, I don't know the word to use, to think that someone is exploiting the genocide for their own means. We still have issues to deal with revisionists, those who want to tell the Rwandan the genocide against the Tutsis in their own way, because of monetary terms, because of not being happy about what's happening in Rwanda. And it's quite unfortunate that they're getting an audience they don't deserve, particularly among the young generation who live in the diaspora. There's need to engage them, to tell them to come and visit Rwanda, to visit the memorial sites in Intarama, here at Gisozi, where the genocide actually took place. So they really get to understand the story, rather than reading or hearing, And it's good that many guests who have come for the Chogam are visiting these sites. Yes, they will tell the story as they saw it.
Yes, and I think that that's great contribution from Rwanda really to the world, to be able to expose as many people to the reality of the history of this nation using a platform as big as Chogam. But one of the other things that came out of the Prime Minister of the UK, Boris Johnson, he talked about the need for every girl to have access to education. He talked about empowering them when they come out so they can have equal opportunities and that competitive advantage, and how much has been invested in doing so. Looking at just what has been talked about at this particular opening ceremony, but also what took place at the Women's Forum. We saw things related with equal opportunities for women representation in leadership. GBV come out so strongly. What do you guys have to say about seeing this being really recognized at this level? And I'll start with you, Doctor.
Well, it's not an exaggeration to say that the Prime Minister is preaching to the converted, because, the government of Rwanda has been at the forefront of promoting the interests and the rights of women, not only in public life, but in education, in health. The government of Rwanda have had the privilege of doing research in this country on maternal health. The government of Rwanda takes maternal health very seriously. The government of Rwanda was probably among the first in Africa to vaccinate teenage girls against certain forms of cancers. So, yeah, in many ways, the Prime Minister is preaching to the converted. But also, I mean, Rwanda has done a great deal, but I see that this is increasingly an important issue to almost every African government. So, yeah, I don't think that what he's saying is something that we Africans need to take up. We have taken it up. We are doing these things. And yeah, the era of men being superior to women or men taking all the opportunities, I think that's part of our history, but it's not part of our present, and it will not be part of our future.
Indeed, and talking about the future, one of the things that we saw at the forum, and it's very nice to see gentlemen just like Prince Charles, just like Boris Johnson, talk about issues like this. The issue of engaging men came out very strongly at the Women's Forum. How can we engage men when it comes to issues like ending violence against women and girls? What do you make of that? And I'll come to you, Isaac.
I think in Rwandan culture and history, men often used to meet in the evening, you know, to share local brew, popularly called urwagwa. I want us to suggest that maybe men could be coming together as men to hold special sessions to talk about gender-based violence without the presence of the women.
Wow. Okay.
It could be thoughtful for them, you know, to maybe a kind of retreat for them, you know, and maybe at a later stage, they invite the women to tell them the resolutions that they came up with and how they're going to spread the word.
Wow.
That could be one medicine because it could touch their raw nerve in case they still have a certain, you know, ill feelings of mistreating their women, whether psychologically. By the way, it's not only, you know, smacking or beating a woman or slapping them or kicking them, but some men also torture their wives psychologically. Like the silence, you know, a man can choose to keep quiet, you know, when they come home and the wife is saying, hello, welcome, and just keeps quiet, like ignoring. That's also another form of torture, you know, and
psychological violence, it is still violence.
Engaging men should really come out in the actual sense of engaging, the men themselves taking the forefront, you know. Let them take positions in women ministries, big ones, you know, like, you know, in charge of sensitization, you know. They could become also good preachers about how gender-based violence can end.
Wow, that really falls right into what Prince Charles was talking about when he said bold. We need to be bold with our ambitions and decisive when it comes to action. I say that falls right there. But I want to also touch what Baroness Patricia Scotland talked about, who is the current Commonwealth Secretary General and also might be handing over that seat to somebody else. I want to touch a little bit of what we think the outcome of that will be. But she talks about friendship. She talked about loyalty. She talked about equal partnerships. She talked about everybody being heard. But we also had Boris Johnson talk about that. And later on, Prince Charles saying everybody deserves to be heard. We need to be equal partners. And it is this friendship. And I think Prince Charles, Boris Johnson talked there about the fact that this all goes back very many years. Prince Charles talking about over 70 years, and that being the foundation of all the solutions that we are about to see. Is that a reality that we will be seeing, an equal Commonwealth in terms of partnerships, in terms of everything, a voice at the table? But also the most interesting thing a lot of our critics have been talking about, Commonwealth within the Commonwealth, the equal wealth within the Commonwealth. Is that a reality that we could see?
It should be a reality. I mean, Patricia Scotland, with her voice that exudes confidence, she said, this is the time we should respect each other.
Yes.
For me, that was a strong takeaway. We should push for equality. I'm fed up of, you know, how people describe some countries that are participating at this CHOGM, the islands in the Pacific. When you target to the size, say the small islands of, what are you trying to mean?
Yes.
You know, it's in the same spirit that some countries, or some people choose to describe Rwanda, like the tiniest Central African country, Rwanda. Why don't you say just Rwanda, Tuvalu, Fiji, without putting on those connotations? And Prince Charles himself also underscored it. And for me, it gave me the impression that he's mindful of the fact that this is the time hey, Commonwealth countries should, see each other as commons. And perhaps, Isabella, the choir, the Rwanda School of Creative Arts, brought up the message clearly with smooth voices. It wasn't rap music. It was slow, and I'm sure everyone listened carefully, and they should reflect on the lyrics of it.
Yes.
One destiny, one goal. They touched also on education, that Boris Johnson talked about, girls' education, on everything. It all zeroes on equality, one destiny. And the song is called Destiny. For me, it summed up everything.
Yes. That is the goal indeed. Before we go to the electing of the new helm, Prime Minister Boris Johnson handed over to the President of the Republic of Rwanda, President Paul Kagame, and he called him a partner. He said he was somebody who shares his ambitions and enthusiasm. And well, Rwanda will now be at the helm. Yeah. What are we thinking is going to happen? What do you anticipate? What does that era look like to you?
It's very difficult for me to say, well, it's going to be like this or like that. But I think what President Kagame did as chairman of the AU does suggest to me that he might shake things up a little bit, because he's known for shaking things up, and he shook up the AU. When he was chairman of the AU, you could see that for the first time, almost everyone was paying attention.
I want to ask you to hold your breath on that. We really need to understand very well what you mean by he might shake things up as he did at the helm of AU. But we have to cross back to studio to speak to my colleagues who are on ground. Yes, Sam. What is the atmosphere?
Yes,
what is the atmosphere like? We just witnessed some really inspiring speeches, great commitments, but what is the atmosphere in the room like?
Thank you very much, Isabel. As actually the opening ceremony just concluded, very many people right here at the Kigali Convention Center are so excited for the official opening ceremony of the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting right here in Kigali, Rwanda 2022. So everyone is simply excited of what has been talked about, be it economic inclusion, the partnership of the Commonwealth nations, and actually everyone is delighted that Rwanda, the youngest member of the Commonwealth, has been able to organize such a successful meeting. That's the mood right here at the Kigali Convention Center.
All right. And that is our colleague Sam Kalisa.
But before I hand it over to you, yes, Isabel, right here with me joining is the former Minister of British International Development, Andrew Mitchell. Hello, Sam. Thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon.
First of all, I'll ask, how is it in Rwanda?
It's wonderful to be back here. I hadn't been here at all during COVID, but I've been back twice this year, and as always, the welcome is fantastic, and everything's so well organized. And many of the investors who come to Rwanda have been blown away by the fact that this is a really well organized conference. It's really attractive to investors. It's brilliantly run. Everything starts on time. It's well organized. So, as a showcase for Rwanda, how Rwanda has come on in recent years, it's absolutely superb.
So one of the things that were talked about by every one of the speakers right here is the inclusion and integration of the Commonwealth countries, and actually working towards a common goal, as actually this year's theme says, delivering a common future. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I think that's right. The fact that there's 2.6 billion people who are effectively members of the Commonwealth, that it's a very attractive family. Other people want to join it. That's a very good thing. And also, Britain has handed over the chair to Rwanda. And I think it's great that President Kagame and Rwanda will help fashion the Commonwealth over the next 2 very important years. There are real challenges, COVID, pandemics, climate change. These are huge challenges for the world, and particularly for Africa. And I think it's very good that we've got a country that is doing so well, and a president who is so well respected, who are now taking forward the Commonwealth to its next stage.
Talking about the integration of the Commonwealth, you are one of these people that have continuously advocated for justice for people, the survivors of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. And now that this meeting is happening right here, as many fugitives who actually committed crimes against humanity right here in Rwanda are in some of the countries in the Commonwealth. What do you have to say about this, and what should such a gathering mean in terms of bringing such people to justice?
Well, I hope it will add to the urgency of bringing such people to justice. We have 5 of them living in the United Kingdom, free at the moment, and it's a very important issue for us. If justice is denied, if justice is delayed, it is denied. And it's very important that people who are suspected of these heinous crimes are put before a court and a proper judicial process. I very much hope it will happen in Britain in the near future, and that any country that is harbouring alleged fugitives make sure that those fugitives are brought to trial.
So you just talked about the meeting, but beyond the meeting, beyond the gathering like this, and onto the practicability of everything that was talked about here and other actually side meetings, what should really be in the action on the ground, in particular member states of the Commonwealth, towards achieving this common future that we're always talking about?
Well, one of the great things about the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting is that they are now all going to go off and spend 2 days talking to each other without a lot of advisors there, in a very informal way. And that means that these thoughts, what you say quite rightly is the key agenda, will be right at the top of the 54 heads of government or the most senior people who are here from those governments. And there's no better way of getting a good conversation and a plan going forward to put flesh on the bones, what was so eloquently set out in this gathering this morning.
Yes, finally, before I let you go, recently President Paul Kagame talked about something very crucial, that since it's a Commonwealth, as the name says, it should be an inclusive way of sharing actually the interest of the Commonwealth, and not it lying into some of the countries and others are left out. What do you have to say about that, and what are your recommendations as we move forward?
Well, I think the Commonwealth is an inclusive organisation. Other people want to join it. It's up to the Commonwealth to decide who should or should not be members of it. But it's a wonderful organisation, a North-South organisation. It doesn't replace other international organs. It stands on its own, and it's a force for good, and we need to make sure it gets on being there.
All right.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, sir. That was Andrew Mitchell, the former British Minister of International Development. And Isabel, as you just heard it, it is a platform that indeed needs to bring together member states to actually develop economically, to just integrate and actually put every effort together towards the common future that is being talked about, as it is actually the future, the theme of this year's Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting.
Kalisa, for bringing us that insightful, exclusive interview and for keeping us up to date on what is taking place. Still in the studio with me, top researchers and respected journalists. Well, coming back to you, Dr. Goloba, before we crossed to my colleague Sam, you were talking to us about your expectations in terms of what could happen now that Rwanda is in charge. You talked about President Kagame shaking things up when he was well, at the helm when it came to African Union. Could you expound?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't, before President Kagame took up that position, and even since he left it, I haven't seen a head of the AU who has been so actively engaged with the affairs of Africa, who has brought together so many experts, sons and daughters of Africa who are scattered around the world, brought them back to come and address issues of concern and of interest to Africa. I mean, you know the committee of experts he set up. Eminent sons of Africa and daughters of Africa living in Switzerland, living in all corners of the world. They gathered here in Kigali so many times to address themselves to issues like how to fund the AU.
Yes.
The AU has been dependent on foreign handouts for a very long time.
Yes.
Not a single chairman before President Kagame had addressed that issue with any degree of seriousness. No one since him has. I mean, one president who took over after he left almost took over quietly and left quietly. So Yeah, and President Kagame also did galvanize leaders to begin to address issues of security and wars on this continent, how the AU could address this.
Yeah.
So it was a very animated period where loads of things were happening, a lot of, even sometimes a bit of quarrels at the AU with some countries saying Rwanda, as my colleague Gavi said, saying Rwanda as a small country really pushing this very large agenda and thinking, why are these people, why are they pushing us? So I think that he is likely to bring up issues of concern in the Commonwealth that perhaps people have been thinking about for a very long time.
And that's the point
that no one has been addressing. I mean, when I hear Prince Charles, or the Prime Minister of Britain, saying, well, or the Secretary General of the Commonwealth saying, oh, it's high time now we treated each other
everybody
as
equal, yes.
70 years later? Really?
And that's the thing, because the question is, there's so much that he could deal with, and there's been speculation of what his point of focus could be.
Yeah.
Where do you think he's going to start? What do you think might be his top 3 priorities?
You know, I don't know what they're going to be, but I'm going to tell you what I think, what I would like to see him address. The Commonwealth is always presented as this big, united family where everybody is friendly to everybody else, where we all address common concerns. You know, since Chogam has been here, I was reminded of an essay that I wrote 30 years ago when I was an undergraduate, and which really got me into a long argument with my teacher, my teacher of international relations. And I can tell you that 30 years ago, I was rubbishing the Commonwealth. I wouldn't rubbish it as much as I did then, but I still think that there are issues that we should avoid being sentimental about the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth has countries that see themselves as a little bit above the others. There's a great deal of lecturing that goes on from those countries to African countries. We know this. We see this, we hear this. When Prince Charles says, you know, conversations begin with listening, I wish we could do that a bit more.
Yes.
I mean, we hear countries or governments condemning others for human rights abuses and this and this. They don't listen. They lecture a lot.
More talking, less listening.
And personally, I think that it would be nice if President Kagame began to champion a move towards less lecturing and more listening and more mutually respectful engagement. That I would like to see. Now, I don't know the details of the economic relations between African countries in the Commonwealth and, say, the European ones or the more developed ones. But I think that we could do more in terms of us learning from the more advanced countries how to build our economies. We could do more to learn how they do certain things that we are not yet able to do. We could do more to build our universities, drawing from the experience of countries with universities that are now several hundred years old. Our universities struggle with so many things. So I think that at the level of, at the cultural level, there are so many things we can learn. But for me, the priority is let's have less lecturing, more listening, and more mutual respect.
More mutual respect, and respect is something that was a sing-along. It was a red thread when you look at all the speeches that were made, starting from President Paul Kagame at the beginning, who was talking about Rwanda being holistically transformed, but also he was talking about the need to build each other. And I think that now that he is going to be having that platform, perhaps that is something that he can champion. But I want to hear from you, Isaac, what you think his core interventions or points of action might be, and what would you want to see? He wants to see less lecturing, more listening. What do you want to see?
And more observation of what he is going to do. Yes, apart from listening and learning from each other, I would love also, because it's pretty hard to really predict, you know, President Kagame of what exactly he's going to do. But of course...
Is that a good thing?
It's a good thing. It's a good thing not to be read, you know. But what I expect him to start with, of course, the way he did turned around the AU, I would like also him to maybe remind the people he'll be working with, for the sake of continuity, they don't activate the sleep mode once he hands over the baton. That's the biggest challenge.
So that's sustainability.
Sustainability of it.
Okay.
You know, because if he takes the chair, we expect good things, of course, from many, many people who have observed President Kagame, the man, the character, the leader, you know. Once he leaves, that's the trouble with these big organizations. You remember when he pushed NEPAD, the new Partnership for Africa Development, or when the AGOA program came into, was being unveiled, the Africa Growth Opportunity Act. Everyone was on board. The Africa Peer Review Mechanism, he first took care of it. But once he left, and then, well, I wouldn't want to condemn the other African leaders, but it shouldn't be seen like, you know, one man, you know, championing, you know, these organizations. We always engage our people on social media platforms at Deutsche Welle. Every time we post about something about Rwanda, many of the people come to comment about the post. They're like, I'm in Cameroon. Can you lend us your president for 2 weeks? I'm here. Can you give us, you know, Kagame for a month? You know, and when we engage them, we're like, why exactly do you want him to come? Because he's a man of action. You know. So, but the issue would be once he hands over the baton at the end of the Commonwealth chairmanship, will there be continuity?
Or do we go back to sleep mode?
Or do we go back to sleep mode?
Speaking of continuity, handing over, and what happens before or after, well, the heads of government are expected to decide on the next Secretary General of the Commonwealth Secretariat while they're here in Kigali. Now, deliberations are already starting as we speak on lots of different things, but that's going to be one of the things. What do you anticipate is going to happen? Will the Baroness still hold the office? Do we see the leadership shifting? What do you anticipate?
To be honest with you, I haven't really been paying that much attention. I know that the chair is up for grabs. I've heard that the current foreign minister of Jamaica is gunning for it. I don't know who else. I'm not well informed, and personally, I wouldn't comment on her steering or the quality of her steerage of this organization. Again, I haven't been paying that close attention. I tend, the older I get, the more I seem to fold in and look more at Africa than look beyond Africa. So there are too many issues in the Great Lakes region alone to keep somebody 28 hours of the day awake and engaged. So at that level, I'm sorry, I don't have a lot to contribute, but we will see what will happen. Okay. I wish her the best.
Well, we still are privileged to have you think more about Africa. But coming to you, Isaac, we know that a Commonwealth Secretary General can serve a maximum of 2 terms, which is about 4 years. And she still has some time. She will soon hand over. But do you think it's time for her to go, or do you think she still has some good to do? Do you anticipate the leaders might want her to be changed? What do you make of the situation?
The tough one there. Maybe in the coming deliberations of the heads of state, and if they could come to a compromise between her and the Prime Minister of Jamaica, who really badly wants the baton, anxiously waiting, really, you know, when you know, even before the turning instead of looking forward, I really doubt whether he would give her room. As far as I've tried to read what Jamaica is trying to achieve once it gets the baton, is that they really want to engage the UK, or England for that matter, about their past.
Yes.
You know. And it could take us back to be reminded also of the Commonwealth as a relic of colonialism, which some observers wouldn't like, you know, to take for center stage as to the achievements or the goals that it should have under the chairmanship of President Paul Kagame.
Yes.
You know, so that's there could be a kind of battle or clash of the titans. But well, let's wait and see. Let me not speculate so much for the sake of the viewers.
Yes.
Let's wait and see. But inside, I might have a hint that I'm not comfortable talking here.
Actually, personally, Isabel, I think that we've been pussyfooting around that issue for a very long time. And for me, and this may be a reflection of my liking for controversy, I would like to see somebody push this agenda. because it has to be addressed. We can't just look at it and leave it there, complain about it, but do nothing about it. And I think that the West Indians have been way ahead of us Africans in terms of addressing this big elephant in the room of slavery and its long-term consequences. I mean, we can't pretend that it hasn't had consequences. It has. But I've also been pleasantly, what can I say? I've been rather pleased about the reaction to this in the UK itself. Because the West Indians have been pushing it hard, and in the UK, intellectuals are beginning to sit up and say, yeah, this must be addressed. I have heard on broadcasts on the BBC and other international media, descendants of owners of slaves saying, my family was engaged in this. We accumulated a lot of wealth. We are very wealthy, but it's time we addressed this matter. So there are big families in the UK, including the family of the former Prime Minister Cameron, who accumulated a lot of wealth on the back of African slaves. I think that, for me, I would like to see the Commonwealth address this. And that would even be the one reason why I would choose that we choose somebody who can push it.
Indeed. Well, hopefully we can get to see that kind of reality. But a notable fact is that the incumbent faces opposition from Jamaica's Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade Minister Kamina Johnson, who, by the way, has already been endorsed by two influential forces and members of the bloc, and that is the UK and India. Now, shortly we'll be crossing over to Kigali International Airport, where my colleague Kagabo will be giving us updates. But before we do that, I still want to go back a little bit to the issue of Rwanda being at the helm. Right. One of the things that that has come out very strongly, and even listening to my colleague Sam having that exclusive interview, there seems to be a lot of how can I put this? A lot of expectations around this. What do you, and I know you've answered this earlier, but is there any reason to be concerned when it comes to how much responsibility Rwanda is taking on and Rwanda's leadership is taking on in terms of if that might be too much? Rwanda has been acknowledged as one of the youngest, one of the newest members of the Commonwealth. And I see your face telling me stories, Dr. Goloba, like, how long are we going to talk about this, Isabel?
Exactly.
Haven't they proved themselves enough? But yes, is there any risk? Can it ever be too much? Or should Rwanda just keep gunning for these things and there are no risks that come with that?
I personally don't think that there is such a thing as too much engagement. I think that President Kagame has proved that he's a man of action, as my colleague said, and as other Africans across the continent have observed. I mean, look at what he did at the AU. He was at the AU much of the time. He was in Addis Ababa. This country kept running smoothly without him. It means there are people here who can run this country, even when he's not here physically. Even when
he's empowered them enough to take care of Rwanda. It's time for him to do some global impact.
We have seen him traveling. Some people have complained about it. Again, outsiders. And I can name one Professor Philip Renchens in Belgium. He's always constantly complaining about President Kagame's travels. I've never understood why it's a concern for him. But I don't think that there can be too much. First of all, Rwanda is the youngest member of the Commonwealth. Rwanda is a developing country. Rwanda is a country with great ambitions. It can only benefit from this. The more the president is engaged outside of Rwanda, the more visibility Rwanda gets, the more people become curious about this country, the more people get to acquire a certain awareness of the challenges that face this country, of the great achievements it has made in the last 2 decades or so. That can't be bad for Rwanda. The exposure, the understanding it creates, the opportunities it creates for Rwanda. I've been at the business forum. I've heard people now really scrambling to come and invest here. This is coming out of his engagement. Look, we have Bugesera Airport. The Qataris are funding much of its construction. The Qataris have acquired shares in Rwanda Air. The Qataris have set up tourism facilities here. The Americans have done, South Africans has done. This comes as a result of this exposure that Rwanda is getting, as a result of a very, very active movement that it has. So I don't think that there can be too much engagement. I think that what's happening is the right thing to happen, and I hope there can be more of that.
Let me just add on something there. When in the presence of structures, there's always nothing to worry about, and that is what Rwanda has successfully done. You know, if you have a home and you leave clear instructions, or there are clear instructions of what everyone has to do, their role, then you have nothing to worry. I remember some time back in Germany, we had an issue of no government for 5 months. Yeah, because there was no outright winner, and the coalition talks were taking longer and longer. There's a time also even Belgium had issues with leadership, but things kept moving.
Yes.
You know, now to the present right now, there are heads of state in Europe or leaders who are also actively engaged in Brussels, in the EU, and things move. So why should it surprise anyone that, or why should it worry rather anyone that President Kagame taking over, or they're swallowing too much that they can, stomach? No.
Well, you heard it. We'll have to come back a little bit later on to the issue of what this means for Rwanda. But let's start diplomacy. There's been a lot of conversations around the notable fact that the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, is in Rwanda, and Prince Charles, amid this controversy around the fact that the United Kingdom is sending or has sent asylum seekers to Rwanda, but also the fact that British Prime Minister Boris Johnson earlier did also make a very strong statement saying that the deal is going to help break up people smuggling networks. What do you gentlemen think of a situation where Rwanda is actually receiving these asylum seekers, but also now with all of that is going on, we have these heads of state together in one place. What does that mean for diplomacy? And I'm going to start with you, Isaac.
Of course, for me, it's a good development. And it's not the first time, by the way, that Rwanda is welcoming migrants or refugees, The breadth with which they condemn the country. Where were they when Rwanda itself evacuated the Eritreans and Somalis and South Sudanese from Libya? I was expecting them to be mindful of that and at least, not bash the way they're bashing it. That so it's not capable of, taking care of asylum seekers and migrants. Anyway, do they fall even the lives of refugees living in Rwanda, the Congolese or Ugandans, Chadians, even we have Afghans here, But because everything in the world we live in is politicized in all ways, even including that plant next to you. Someone might say, oh, well, Commonwealth, it's blue and white and red. Why do you put the green there?
Where do you
have the green? I found the greens,
Yes. Yes.
I mean, sometimes it becomes boring and you're like, should I go and live on an island, where there's no connection from the world because of the venomous words people throw each other out of a good act. Out of a good act, someone will still say, no, you don't deserve it. When you do bad again, they'll just keep quiet. Maybe they say, no. We are waiting to challenge him when they do something, good. So the thing is, even the UK itself is going to push to come out of the European Court of Human Rights because of that issue. The Conservatives are like, well, if we pushed and got out, we achieved Brexit, why not get out of the Human Rights the Human Rights Court? And no one shouted about it. But they're just focused on the fact that Rwanda said, hey, it's okay, you can bring them.
You can bring them.
You can bring them. So it became troublesome because their bread, the source of bread, especially those taking care of refugees, looks like there's someone is taking a slice away from it.
Speaking of things that are getting everybody's attention, even as we get to our parting shots soon, coming to you, Dr. Golova, there's been a lot of excitement around the fact that the president of Rwanda and the president of Uganda at the Commonwealth together. And speaking of diplomacy, not just them, but you have a lot of heads of state in one place. What does this mean, not just for East Africa, for Rwanda, but for the entire Commonwealth?
Well, First of all, let me very briefly address myself to the issue of the refugees and the noise it has generated. I'm slightly sympathetic to people who criticize the British government for abdicating its responsibility for looking after those particular refugees. What I don't understand is why Rwanda, which has volunteered to house them as permanent solutions are found, then becomes the subject of attack. Because in refugee studies, there's something called permanent solutions. These people are coming to Rwanda. Nobody is forcing them to live in Rwanda on a permanent basis. They are going to be here, they are going to apply for asylum, or they're going to have their asylum claims examined, in which case, if they succeed, they are going to go back to the UK. There are those who may choose to go back to their countries of origin. There are those who may choose to live in Rwanda. There is no one particular solution that is being offered and into which they are going to be forced. So there are options that are being offered. Rwanda has already demonstrated that it has welcomed refugees here who have been given the same options. Many have left subsequently. Others went to America, Europe, Canada, wherever. Others went to Uganda. Others are still here. No one has made any noise about it. Incidentally, yesterday I saw Michaela Wrong writing about how, Rwanda, people can't do this and people are not safe and so on. And this morning I see a video clip of a community in the north of England where white people are beating up Muslims. And there's a massive fight there. And I thought, okay, so refugees are not safe in Rwanda. What if they're Muslim refugees? And they risking being beaten up in Britain, where this woman lives? So I think that the attacks on Rwanda are either uninformed or misinformed, or it's just willful creation of trouble where there is none. At the level of diplomacy, it's a good thing that President Museveni is here. I mean, we all know that there have been tensions, and these tensions have raised concerns, not just in Rwanda, but also in Uganda.
Yes.
There are so many people whose mobility was curtailed as a result of whatever happened at the border. There are so many people still here in Rwanda who I talk to who still fear to go to Uganda as a result of the things that caused the border closure. So in the last few weeks, we've had moves towards a rapprochement between the two countries, which has put many of us at ease. I mean, for me, even at the height of the tensions, I continued to go back and forth. I didn't suffer any problems. I would enter Uganda freely, leave freely, come here, enter, go out. But I know that there are people who couldn't do that, who feared to do it. There are people who can't fly for all kinds of reasons, who would have loved to travel here or travel to Uganda by road, but they couldn't. So yeah, seeing President Museveni here, subsequent to all the moves towards rapprochement, is a good thing. And hopefully we are going to arrive at a point where Uganda and Rwanda are going to sort out their differences on a permanent basis so that we don't have to see a recurrence of these tensions, because we've seen it happen over and over again. This is not new. This is just another episode of tensions that have been there for a very long time. So at that level, I am happy that the old man is here.
Yeah.
I am happy that President Kagame has gone to Uganda, and I'm happy that efforts are being made to solve whatever the problems are. As to the other countries, I was having a drink with friends last night, and a friend of mine has been very much in contact with some of the West Indian delegations here, the Jamaicans and others, and they have been blown over by what they've seen here. Now, when I was a student in Europe, I had a lot of West Indian friends whose ignorance about things African was mind-blowing. They really have very little understanding of Africa. They tend to see Africa as extremely backward compared to them because they are being fed on media reports coming from the United States and the Western world. Now they're here. Some of them are in Rwanda or in Africa for the first time, and they're realizing that actually we are just like them, or we are even probably slightly better than them.
Yeah.
So it has given them an opportunity to observe, to learn, and to appreciate Africa a bit more, which means that the disconnection that has been there between Africa and the West Indies is probably going to be narrowed as a result of people traveling and observing and witnessing and exchanging ideas and so on and so forth. So I think that at that level, the benefits for all sides are quite immense.
Well, there's something that has kind of like stood out during this process is Canada's interest in Rwanda. We've recently seen, leaders on both sides travel and dialogue going on there. And you talked of Qatar. Issues and critics saying, hey, watch your back, let this not be another China-Africa situation. Do you feel there's need for any cautiousness in that regard? Are you excited to see this collaboration at this level going on? How are you feeling about this, Isaac?
First things first, Canadian cooperation with Rwanda has been there for many, many, many years, unless people don't closely follow bilateral relations between these two countries. Secondly, we have a big community of Rwandans living in Canada, spread out everywhere, in Montreal, Quebec, Toronto. For generations have been living there, and some have returned. I mean, it's just a continuity of, the relations that have been there between the two countries. So maybe what I see is that they're going to push it to the next level of where in the past years, we've seen Rwandans migrating to Canada for various reasons, for growth and opportunities and all that. And it could be now this time business. I think there's a university here, Carnegie Mellon University, here, Canadian. I think that's
American.
That's American. There is no. Bursaries are given to students here to go to study at some university in media studies and all that in Canada. So perhaps I'm seeing bigger things in business and also education in such a way that those going to study in Canada will be, enrolling in the campuses here. But I'm not taken by surprise. I would say I proudly do read and research. And sometimes I feel sorry for people who jump to conclusions, without reading. Reading is healthy. Researching is healthy. It opens up your mind to so many things. Justin Trudeau, working together with the President Kagame, it shouldn't be a new thing.
Yes.
No, successive governments have worked, closely with Rwanda from Canada. Yeah, why a surprise?
Good things to come. Gentlemen, every good thing comes to an end. It's been a joy learning from you and learning a couple. Time is short. We could talk about this forever. But hey, what are some of the biggest lessons? I know we didn't even get to touch issues like climate change that were a priority, biotech and all that. There's been so much. But hey, keep it RTV. We have so much that is coming up for you, so much to learn. And you can also follow. We have some breaking news coming your way. So make sure you keep it RTV. Gentlemen, as we close, what has been the biggest lessons for you? Delivering a common future is such a bold, ambitious goal. But hey, here we are. We've seen political will. The countries have come down here and everybody over 2 billion people that have been following closely this particular CHOGM. What have been the greatest lessons? And what are your joy points going into this and almost coming out of it? And is there anything that has left you feeling, perhaps that could have been different, starting with you, Dr. Golova?
No, I don't. I'm not able to think of anything that I think should have been different. All I can say now is that, sometimes I tell people that I've been here for 22 years and they gasp for air. They think they don't have...
Here as in living in Rwanda.
I first came to Rwanda in 2000. And for many reasons, I never left. Or when I have left, I've come back. Now, having observed and studied Rwanda, again, when I tell people I study politics in Rwanda, they say, but how are you able to study politics in Rwanda? That place is... As a student of Rwanda's history, mainly the post-genocide history, as somebody with a keen interest in how Rwanda works politically, I have seen Rwanda make very enormous strides. At the level of diplomacy, one thing that Isaac didn't mention is that there are many countries that first established diplomatic relations with Rwanda at a fairly low level, which have subsequently upgraded them to ambassadorial level and appointed ambassadors and set up embassies here. This is not done because they love Rwanda. necessarily. They are doing this because they see Rwanda as a good potential partner. They see Rwanda as growing influence, not only in Africa, but elsewhere, and they would like to associate with that. And I think that Canada is just one of those. You start small time, and then you see Rwanda growing, and you think some good things are going to happen here, and we want to be part of that, and you upgrade. So Rwanda hosting CHOGM here is testimony to Rwanda's willingness to push ahead, to make progress, in spite of the very enormous odds it has had to work against. I mean, I see people teasing those who are campaigning for CHOGM not to come here and saying, oh, well, guys, you've failed, CHOGM has come, it has gone on very well. I think that there is something to be said about that. That Rwanda has achieved these things by sheer force of personality, if a country has a personality. I think Rwanda has a very forceful personality. And in many ways, it reflects the personality of the president.
Wow.
So that's all I'm going to say.
Wow. Very strong words right there. But hey, tough call to follow, but you have to bring it home for us, Isaac.
Yes.
Biggest lessons.
The biggest takeaways, there were many strong points made at different forums. The Women Forum wanting to be also part of decision-making in countries where they have not got that chance. And also the youth saying, hey, look, we've been talking about unemployment for many, many years. Now just cancel the debts, and then maybe that money could be used to finance our projects. And business let the business start now. Let the people bring the money, and I'm sure they're going to bring the money. Just like my colleague here was saying, the many businessmen who are anxious to bring in the dollars, perhaps maybe it would boost even our currency here. One prediction I want to make here, you remind me, in the coming days, President Kagame is going to form a steering committee to make sure that the resolutions in each and every forum are put into action.
Well,
watch the space.
We don't even need to go far. I was privileged to be in one of the rooms that was having deliberations, and I can guarantee you by the time we made one of the statements that came out of the leadership very strongly was that those interventions were going to be acted on. So that would not be surprising. Good stuff, gentlemen. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. And for
inviting us.
and for keeping us informed. A big fan of your work. Isabel Masozera for RTV, keeping you updated with what's happening at the CHOGM 2022. And my colleagues are in the field and on the ground at different venues to make sure you stay updated all throughout the day. So make sure you don't go away. Thanks for watching.